our role is to mobilize the cities to do these concrete activities, because everything is based on partnerships and collaboration. Local communities want to act on this issue, and that's why the whole spectrum of SDGs is so crucial.
We were the first city to sign the Forerunner City program, and for the city of Espoo, the sustainability is a very important issue and very important value, and that's why I'm here.
Well, hello everyone. It was not long ago, at the start of the new millennium, that the United Nations was focused on the 8 Millennium Development Goals that were set for the year 2015. And that was rather optimistic, so perhaps, more realistically, 2015 marked the creation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. And although much was learned from the MDGs, achieving the SDGs is also quite a challenge. One of the outcomes of all the lessons learned is that if these goals are to be achieved, there will have to be a greater involvement of all the stakeholders. It can't simply be a top-down project for our very diverse and challenged world. So one of the most recent and promising projects created to push the SDGs forward is the 25+5 Cities Leadership Programme. And one hope is that the 25+5 cities will become lighthouses, inspiring us to all implement the SDGs by 2030. But how? What makes the approach of the 25+5 cities unique? And what can this initiative do differently that might be more effective in taking on the challenge of 17 ambitious and demanding goals that, if achieved, could redefine life for this planet's burgeoning and growing population? We'll try to answer all these questions in this discussion as we look at these with some key players in the SDG-related initiatives. Now, I once heard a saying that said, if the rich could pay the poor to die for them, the poor could make quite a living. Well, ironically, if we don't achieve what we want to with the SDGs, it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, we're all going to be very much affected. Let's see what our guests think about this. We have with us, I'll just introduce them quickly, Michael Molnar is the Director General of the United Nations. We have Morten Volden, who is the Chief City Executive of Trondheim, the city in Norway. We have Hilda Opukul, who's a Special Advisor on the SDGs to the Minister of Finance in Ghana. And note that Accra is one of the 25 cities. Klaus-Peter Heidinger is the Global Head of City Programs at Siemens. And we have Gareth Presch, founder of the World Health Innovation Summit. And also with us, Matthew Simon Pickles, freelance journalist who's doing work for the BBC at the World Economic Forum. Matt, thanks you could join us as well. So I'm going to start off just asking Mr. Molnar first. You see this, the 25+5 Cities Leadership Programme as something that connects the local on a global scale. In what way?
Well, I see it also as a physical manifestation of where we are in the world today. Most of us are already living in cities, and even more of us are going to be living in the cities in the future. This is where the citizen gets his services from government, certainly local government. This is where we're going to change the way that we live and we work, and therefore it makes absolutely completely sense to not just do a cities network and expand it, but also when I see that not a single city who was asked to join this initiative said no. Everybody understands that if we're going to make this work, we're going to have to do it together. Cities are learning from each other, are pooling their resources, their knowledge for the benefit of the citizen.
Just a quick follow-up, sir. What do you feel is the particularly unique aspect to this initiative?
The unique aspect is where we are seeing a buy-in at a scale we've never seen before in civil society, in the public, of these goals. The 17 goals have become the global roadmap in a way that I don't think those who signed the piece of paper 3 years ago really realized, in a most extraordinary way. So this is a big change, that this is not just something that we ask our governments to do. This is something that we all have a responsibility to implement.
Can I follow up on that, please, if that's
please
all right?
go ahead,
So, Michael, you're one of the UN's most senior figures. You've got governments with millions and millions of people, more than cities knocking on your door. You've got businesses with more money than cities knocking on your door. But you've made cities a priority. Can you tell us why that is?
No, it's one of the priorities. We do a lot of work with the business community, who all have to pitch in, and who more and more realize that they have to, and even if they want to survive, they have to be sustainable. So it's not either or, it's together. This is the trick here. Governments are not going to disappear, but we have to work out a collaborative effort on a scale and in a way that we've never done before.
So you're touching on something that I want to follow up with Morten Volden, who's the chief executive, city executive at Trondheim, Norway's third largest city. From that perspective, on the ground, at the city level, what do you feel is the advantage of working at the city level rather than the national government level?
I think we are a university city. We have the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in our city, and they are having this vision, knowledge for a better world. We work close with them with something we call the University City Agreement. And together we can make change, because we are able to make change in our city. And we work together also with the other cities in Norway to do something. I think most people now want to come from conversation to action, and we can do action quite rapidly in the cities. But I think also it's important to go from some examples to a more systemic approach, because this must be done systemic. We need this platform, this framework. So maybe we can invite you to Trondheim in this autumn to celebrate this systemic approach for the SDG cities.
Matt, I'm going to get you to follow up in a second on this, but I want to ask Hilda Opoku, who's the special advisor on SDGs to the finance minister in Ghana. Of course, Accra is a very different city from Trondheim. I want to get your perspective on trying to push this initiative forward, and particularly how some of these initiatives you have to change things at a city level can be funded. How can they be resourced?
So first I want to say that Ghana is a country that takes the SDGs very serious. The president is co-chairing the committee with the Norwegian Prime Minister, actually. So everybody in Ghana, or more or less a lot of people, know about the SDGs. It's not like we heard earlier this morning that 3 and 4 of the students would probably have heard about it. The Afrobarometer shows that Ghana is the country in Africa where most people are actually engaged and involved in the SDGs. When it comes to the city level, we have already developed some infrastructure that is also useful for the city, but then of course they have to build their ownership. And in Africa we have the fastest urbanization in the world right now. And when the Rio conference were in '92, there were 2 megacities in the world. In 2030 there will probably be 30. And this rapid change is both a challenge and an opportunity. And for us to be part of a platform like this one, we can learn from cities that have taken some of the steps before, but there is also a lot of innovation that I think we can bring in our systematic work to the table, because we work closely between city and government.
Yeah, so let's say in 1, 2, 3 years' time this has had a great impact in Accra. What effect could that then have on the rest of Ghana and perhaps the continent of Africa more widely?
Of course, if Accra takes a leader role, other cities in Ghana will benefit from it. But Accra has become kind of a hub, and you were talking about investment, and I can mention that at the end of this conversation, that other cities will also look to Accra and Ghana, and the message will spread. And there is already a lot of collaboration between the African Union members and different states that are visiting each other and talking about the SDGs and learning from each other. And we have started this December with an annual conference on Accra SDG investment. So we have developed a methodology for the budget, which also goes for the city budget. So we see all allocations and costs into all the targets of the SDGs. But a country like Ghana cannot cost all the SDGs themselves, or the city of Accra cannot do that. But by doing that, we can also come to this SDG investment fair and show interested investors that these are the projects we have in the pipeline. Are they interesting for you to come in and support them? And also to work more closely with private sector, so they are more targeted in what they are doing, and we have a dialogue so that we know that that also pays into the SDGs.
So talking private sector, just follow up with Klaus here on that. Siemens, of course, a big multinational company. What role do you see your company playing?
Well, basically two main roles. One is, as a company, we are fully committed to SDG. So we did quite an effort to change our company processes, production sites. But we also working with cities since more than 7 years. We working very closely with about 100 cities all over the world. And we are technology providers, so we have a profound know-how how technology works. And the reason of our engagement here is first that we believe we have to stop waiting on innovations to make a change. We don't have to wait for anything, everything is here. We just have to use it properly. But it's quite hard for cities, to find a roadmap. What can we do to achieve our SDG targets? As long as we compare cities with Singapore, Copenhagen, and Vienna, name it, as every city is completely unique. They have a different baseline, they have a different infrastructure, they have different behavior pattern. And the reason why we are supporting SDG 25.5 is that we see a very, very reasonable approach here, because this program really looks to the DNA of a city. And if we know what is the baseline, and if we know where we want to be in 7 years, we can derive roadmaps. We can derive what needs to be done on a political level, on a technology level, eco-social level, and then what needs to be financed, what needs to be implemented. This is actually our engagement here.
I was going to ask Mr. Molnar a follow-up on this. Of course, you say the fantastic thing is that cities are very keen to get involved, and it's scalable in that respect. What approach have you taken to big business to play a key role in this?
Well, before I get into that, let me just add something and sort of extrapolate from what has just been said by my three colleagues, that one of the really practical reasons is also speed. We're in a hurry. We need to get with the program really fast if you want to solve some of the problems that are falling on us. And cities are much more agile, much more fast once they've taken the decisions, once they've set their roadmap, once they've learned from others to implement it. So with businesses, we are, well, first of all, you are in Davos right now. There's practically not a single conversation since the last 2 or 3 years that is happening here that doesn't have somewhere the SDGs in them. So the awareness of the understanding that this is a page that they need to jump on as well is growing, and we are seeing them being much more agile than governments in many ways, have collectively maybe access to a lot more money to inject. It's going to take a lot of money to put these SDGs in place over the next until 2030. So we connect them. We are right now in the process. You see the Sdg Lab logo over there, a unit in my office that is whose job and whose objective is to do that, to put people together that never talked to each other before, to have conversations that were never had before, and to really empower and get people moving in a collective way. And we are seeing some extraordinary things happening right now in that in that area. Also on sustainable finance, a very important aspect. I just mentioned that. So quite a lot is happening, and it's now becoming not a matter of sort of pushing people to come and have these conversations. They are coming to us and want to know how are others doing, how can we be part of this, how can we learn from best practices elsewhere. It's a very dynamic area right now.
Matt, follow?
Yes, well, so we see a lot of governments, maybe in recent years, have taken some moves that perhaps aren't in line with the SDGs, which can make some people feel quite gloomy about them. What about cities gives you hope that longer-term decision-making is possible?
Well, the experience I've seen until now, I've been part of this, the creation of these 25 SDG cities, and it's just been an incredibly positive experience, and also because it makes sense, and it makes sense to when I see in a room a city like Palo Alto and a city like Abidjan sitting down together to figure out how they can help each other and what kinds of experiences are relevant to each other, and then you spread it to 25 and beyond, you get something very, very powerful. And as I said early on at the beginning of what I said, not a single city we asked to join has said no. In fact, there's a queue.
Yes, I can add to that, because we are experience the same thing at the city level. Business managers that I meet daily, they are now looking into the SDGs. Last week, I sat down with one of these managers, and he said, I think we have 5 SDGs that my company must look tight into, and they want to cooperate with us on a city level. So something happens.
And the scalability is important. That's why I want to get on to Gareth, Gareth Presch, who founded the World Health Innovation Summit. Tell us a little bit about that, the experience you had with that. And I think one of the key points you often make is the scalability.
Yeah, well, the World Health Innovation Summit is a platform and it's global. It applies to everyone. Health is a common theme. I see the SDGs 25+5 as a fantastic opportunity to actually scale the methodology that we've prototyped in Cumbria. So it's a preventative model rather than looking at disease. So we're looking at the likes of obesity, cancer. These are huge problems that we all face, huge costs. In the next 20 years, we're going to have $47 trillion spent on these kind of, conditions. And the World Health Innovation Summit gives us all a great opportunity to actually establish an ecosystem in these communities and share that knowledge. So the knowledge from Trondheim can be easily scalable to Accra.
How challenging?
Transfer that.
Well, so how challenging is it to make people have to literally turn on their heel and think about preventative rather than simply treating symptoms?
Well, that is a big challenge at the moment because our whole system and our whole model is set up for disease. But if we can switch it, and you talk about technology and you look at artificial intelligence, how many jobs can we create if we go to this new model, which is effectively millions of new jobs in a new ecosystem where people are looking at, well-being, meditation, yoga. These are all new jobs we can create at scale. So, and they're also purpose-driven jobs, that gives people a sense of purpose. And in the healthcare system at the moment, by 2030, we'll have 18 million shortfall worldwide. So, we face serious challenges, but there are also opportunities.
We'll get back to that in a little while. But, Mr. Bono, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the obvious, that the 17 goals are the most extraordinary preventative tool that we have given ourselves in many decades, if not forever. If we manage to actually do what we have set out to do by 2030, we would have both cured and prevented a whole series of things that ail us, including some of the big existential problems that we have in front of us.
Well, Matt, I want to follow up with a question from a media perspective, and to some degree I know this because working in the media. Why is it so difficult to tell this story? Why is it so difficult to spread the message that this kind of action can be so effective if properly implemented? Why is it that we're not seeing it in the media?
It's a real challenge. So my job as a freelance journalist is to call 3 or 4 editors at some of the biggest news outlets in the world every week to pitch stories, and I'm very interested in this area, so I try to pitch stories on this. And I'll give a few examples. I won't name names, but a few weeks ago, I had a story with a big outlet, and they refused to use the term the SDGs without using quotation marks because they said that seems like quite an abstract concept. I mean, it's a concept that affects everyone, but another example was one recently on a big climate initiative which was bumped at the last minute by, for a tweet by a certain president. So it's a real challenge. I suppose my call, I've got 3 calls. One to the media is to give a chance to these stories which have long-term significance, find creative ways to tell the stories. To the SDG champions, I'd say make yourself available to journalists for interviews. Michael, you've been brilliant at doing that. And things like the Cities Initiative really brings the SDGs to a very local level, which gives media a better chance of covering it. And to the public, I'd say read, share, write into your media outlets to say, I enjoyed this piece on climate change, I enjoyed this piece on poverty, and show media that there is a business for these long-term impactful stories. I don't know if, in your experience...
It's tough. It was tough. I mean, I was lucky I had my own show, so I could call the shots, but I still got people in the newsroom saying, why did you cover sustainable development on so-and-so? And, most of them don't even know the story, the backstory, so it is difficult. But, Hilda, I want to ask you something. When we look at this, as Michael Molnar has said, there is a challenge because we don't have a lot of time. How quickly have you seen things move in Ghana, in Accra? And what are the lessons you can impart to other cities to make this actually move at a pace which is sustainable too?
Well, I can give the example of plastic waste. Ghana was an economy that 2 decades ago didn't have much plastic. When all these articles started coming in, you didn't have a system for it. So it ended up on the streets, in the gutters, and in the sea, unfortunately. Now, new technology gives us opportunity to solve this in a totally new way. Of course, you have to have a certain level of awareness before something starts moving, but we are now getting a new plastic waste policy. And as part of that, we are using a platform, online platform, and an app to map the whole ecosystem. Who are the ones picking? Who are the ones recycling? Who are the ones collecting and all these things, and we put it together with information. And of course, not everybody in a city like Accra will have access to it. So we have awareness groups that go out to the community and start talking about it. But that shows a leapfrogging from nothing at all to all of a sudden having a very systemic approach to it, and then getting finance into it and developing the infrastructure for waste management. So with the president's goal of making Accra the cleanest city in Africa by 2030, I mean, at least we have started, and I think this is a leapfrogging way to move from doing nothing to actually putting the system in there for the people to be part of it.
Quick question, Klaus, if I may. The company like Siemens, of course, has a global presence, so you're used to dealing with different cultures, different environments, and different challenges in each part of the world. How much has that helped, or how does that help you shape the city's program so that you can actually deal with specific issues in each different place? The diversity is huge.
Well, the diversity is huge because if from a global level, some cities are still facing with, let's say, their infrastructure homework. They have to provide reliable energy, clear water. While other cities, let's say Western world, they now looking to kinds of optimization. And you can learn from both sides. You know, you don't make the mistakes you make in the Western world 20 years ago now in the ones who do their homework. And it's also for the city. I mean, it's not that the city do not have a plan how to do things. They are very, very well advanced. The biggest contradiction right now is let's say, the economic growth versus commitment to environmental targets. If I just name one of the SDG 13, climate action. We all know what happens with climate change and carbon emissions. But this is something, it's not always very popular if you do as a mayor, if you restrict the traffic, if you move people in a different way. So you have to be part of a bigger community in order to make these things happen at the same time for more cities. Because alone as a city decision maker, it's, as I said, it's not always very popular measures you have to introduce.
Matt, any follow-up on this?
I'm quite interested, because Klaus, you're an expert who is providing advice to cities. I'm quite keen to know, what do you see is the importance and the role of experts in working with cities, and what advice do you have for cities about implementing that expertise?
Well, what needs to be done in terms of our SDG program, we need to have the expert for each of the SDGs. I guess this will be very, very helpful for cities and decision maker. And also at the same time, not telling this has to be done, this has to be done. So we have to tweak the model for something which is replicable and also being implemented in one city, you know? Because what works for one city may not work for another city, you know? I'll give you an example. Right now, there are some mainstreams: electromobility, building retrofit, renewables. So if every city would follow this mainstream, we just would have e-bus running around, you know? E-bus makes sense if you have clean energy, because then the energy for the e-bus comes from renewables. If you still produce your energy with coal power plants, e-bus would even make it worse, you know? So this is why you cannot have a common approach. Particular is the answer.
Yeah, everyone has something to add, so I'm going to Gareth first, and then I'll get to everyone else.
I just wanted to add, working with Klaus, you know, he's an expert in his field, but air pollution, for example, has a huge knock-on effect to health. So you're able to then plan, but also then urban design, you know, how we plan our cities. Are we actually developing the housing in the right manner so that we bring our kids up with a social aspect, so that we don't then have crime? So these are really important opportunities for us as experts to come together to support cities with their overall plan, which will have a long-term cost effect. So that's where I see huge benefits.
So quick addition from Morten first, and then Hilda.
Yes, one example how we use experts in Trondheim. We are lucky. We are a small city with 200,000 inhabitants. We have a university, have research organization. We are now working with a smart city project where and there are the university are the coordinator for the project. We are using all the companies, a lot of companies in the city, and we are going from plus house, single house, to plus district, positive energy districts. That's new, but that we must also involve the citizen in this work, because they are part of it. Because it's not enough that the university and the public and the private sector work together. We must also engage the citizens. So this will be an experiment in Trondheim in the coming years, and it can be replicated and scaled up for other cities.
Yeah, I wanted to both agree and disagree with you, because I think that, yeah, every city is unique and some cities are more different than others. But at the same time, for a platform like this, we need to have a common base. And I hope that we actually start a conversation to find that common base that we can all leave from together and see where we are coming in 2025. Because if we all just follow our good intentions, we might do something good, but it might not be the SDGs, it might be something else. And also, like Morten is saying, I think that definitely we need to develop that technical infrastructure, whether it's waste management, energy, or whatever, but still, the culture in between is where we have to start, and it shouldn't be too much top-down. If you don't get the people on board, we are not moving.
So I want to ask Michael Moller this. It's obviously it's a unique initiative in the sense that it really is taking things to a level where the implementation can be seen at a faster rate than depending on a federal level kind of implementation. What concern do you have that if things don't gel quickly enough, that cities might get a little disillusioned and might start to drift away from the idea of working in this?
I don't even think that way. We got to get moving. You can't be sort of negative at your start. And everything I've seen until now, that's unlikely to happen, because the urgency and the importance of getting these things done and getting the stuff right for our citizens is such that if they start to falter, I guarantee you that the citizens themselves are going to call them to order and get them back on track. So I'm an optimist.
Any follow-up? And where do you see the challenges arising?
Well, a quick follow-up. In terms of future trends, so demographic trends, environmental trends, why do you think cities are particularly important and particularly well placed to solve the goals?
Well, because every statistic that I look at, that my colleagues come up with, shows us that by 2050, over 75% of the world population is going to be in cities. We haven't taken into account the negative effects of climate change. Many of the biggest cities are coastal cities, and they may not exist by then. But nevertheless, there's a very clear trend on where this is going. We see it. If you look at every single indicator, cities are the place to be. In fact, you know, it's very much part of a governance transition that we're in right now, where we're moving from a very centralized way of governing ourselves to a much more polycentric, multi-stakeholder way of governing ourselves. And the logic of that points to cities straight away, because you may think about where we were 500 years ago with city-states, but somehow we are going a little bit in that direction, where small is more beautiful than it used to be.
I'm going to ask any other comments you have to be incorporated, as we only have a few minutes, into basically a one-line as to what you see as the next steps. And perhaps, Michael Moller, I can start with you. Just a line on where you see the next steps.
I see a greater integration of this process. This is not the only network of cities. There's plenty of them around. They need to be linked up. I think that all of our organizations, multilateral system, needs to strengthen and formalize not in the negative sense, but I mean structure better the relationship and the mutual support that we can give them. I think that a lot of governments who haven't gotten the message yet need to wake up. And we need to find a way together to accelerate the process that is happening already now.
Okay, Morten.
Yes, I'll go back to the systematic approach, and we are in a hurry, but we must get the platform there so we can collaborate on together with all the cities, 25 plus 5. I'm an optimist like you. So I think we have a lot to do, but I think also we can do something in the cities, because the cities must stimulate and facilitate for innovation. And we have a systematic approach for that also, because we are defining the municipality as a part of the innovation ecosystem in Trondheim. And that could be something we could share with the other cities. So share, learn, link together. That's my approach.
Hilda, a line on your thoughts, next steps.
Yeah, so I think just being part of a platform like this, do something with the motivation. So it has already started a process back in Accra where we are mapping what we are already doing, linking them to the SDGs to also see where are the policy gaps, where are the other action gaps that we need to fill. So in that sense, just being part of a family or partnership is quite powerful in itself. There's one thing I just want to mention when we are talking about cities, and I totally agree that cities talk to each other and not necessarily so much with the government, but some of us come from capital cities where the state actually intervened quite a lot. So we can't really leave the government behind. We have to bring them along also for these kind of conversations.
Klaus.
Well, implementing 17 SDGs within 7 years is quite ambitious for the cities and also for us. So I think we should not start with 17 SDGs at the same time. It would be a mess. We should focus on low-hanging fruits for the participating cities. We have to agree what are really, let's say, the ones where we have the first successes with the program. For instance, climate action, education, health. Those are the things which are probably something 25+5 cities will agree. And then we start implementing, supporting the program, and then from then we take it to the other SDGs.
Okay. Gareth.
And for me, it's, why are we doing this? Because I have 2 young children, 3 and 5. And for me, it's their future. So I think we just need to get started. And I think the opportunity that we have with Trondheim and Accra, for example, is to actually go in and make a difference. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. From the platform of WIS perspective, that's ready to go. The methodology is there. It's proven. We've prototyped it. We have the return on investment. Let's just go and do it.
Expand it.
So let's move forward.
All right. Matt.
Well, I better end on a positive note. So I mentioned earlier that an editor told me recently the SDGs are too abstract. Well, this program, over the next 7 years, we're going to have 25+5 cities making genuine, newsworthy breakthroughs from Accra's waste system to Trondheim's education system. So these are stories that the media can't ignore. So let's work really hard to share these stories, make sure all of these stories are heard. And I think we've got a really positive story to tell. So let's get started.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matt, on that note. And thank you for joining us at the Sdg Lab session looking at the 25+5 Cities Leadership Programme. Obviously, the conversation doesn't end because the work's only just begun. Do follow the work of the SDGs, and the unsgii.org is the site. You can find the work of the foundation as well. So join us next time. Thank you for being with us, and thank you to Matt for co-hosting with me too. Thanks, everyone.